We have just seen another Achilles rupture in the NBA. This time it was Jason Tatum, and it's part of a frankly alarming trend that's been going on for years. There's a reason that they call Achilles ruptures career enders. Interestingly enough, basketball accounts for 47% of all Achilles ruptures in all athletes under 60 years old. The next closest sport is tennis. That only accounts for 13% of injuries. So it's concentrated a lot in basketball. And honestly, Achilles ruptures don't just happen out of nowhere. They are more predictable than you would think. And what you saw in this play right here with Tatum is part of a pattern that has been growing for years, both in pro sports as well as you just don't hear about it as much in amateur sports like what you and me do. So in this video, I want to break down, number one, why Achilles ruptures happen in the first place. Like, what is the mechanism? Number two, why is this happening now? Why are we seeing more of these injuries? And number three, how athletes at any level and at any frequency of play can reduce their risk. Because believe it or not, as much as this happens in pro sports, like I said, it is happening to people like you and me more. Okay, so first of all, let's see what happened to Jason Tatum. In this moment, Tatum's foot loads eccentrically. Now, what does eccentric loading mean? It means he stretches the Achilles while trying to also or then sequentially contract it, meaning his heel is dropping, the calf is stretching, and the Achilles is under this massive tension while then trying to propel forward. Think of it like a huge loaded spring, right, trying to recoil, but the spring already has a crack in it, a rubber band trying to snap back, but the rubber band already has a tear in it. And unfortunately for Tatum, as you can see clear as day, with that negative step he took, he literally created the textbook mechanism of Achilles ruptures. A sudden transition from load under tension to push off. Now remember, this movement pattern doesn't always result in a tear or strain of your Achilles, or honestly, there'd be no one left to play on court. But there are several factors that increase your risk of rupturing your Achilles. Some risks are inherent to everybody, and some you can mitigate. Now, the Achilles tendon is really just an absolutely wild structure in your body. It is made up of two muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus, and it connects those two calf muscles to your heel. But those muscles don't just merge and run down the leg as the Achilles. The fibers of those muscles that create the Achilles tendon literally wrap and twist around each other like a mop wringing out. Now this gives it insane power, but it also makes it prone to injury, especially in its middle area where the blood flow is poorest. Now tears often occur here because of repeated micro damage from those fibers twisting and grinding on each other without any time to recover. Now if that weren't enough, most other tendons have sheaths or wrappings around them that lubricate them, allow them to glide really easily. But you guessed it, the Achilles tendon doesn't have one. It has this thin little nothing film, which leaves it pretty exposed. I mean, you can just feel it right here. I mean, just touch the Achilles, you can feel it. And finally, if that weren't bad enough, one of the muscles that creates the Achilles tendon, the gastrocnemius, also crosses the knee joint, which then puts even extra tension on it. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. I remember when I learned this for the first time, I thought it is an absolute miracle that anybody avoids a rupture. So now that you've got a working knowledge of the Achilles tendon, the question is, why are these ruptures happening more often? Because, like I said, these aren't freak accidents. There is a clear pattern to them, and the rates of rupture are increasing. Now, number one and most obvious is more strain, more load, more games, longer careers. If you look at the research, the biggest risk factors are age at or above 28 years old and a BMI over 25. Now, Achilles tears can happen from one really odd sequence of moves, but it can also be from chronic repetitive strain on the same tendon over and over and over. Take Tatum, for example. He goes all the way to the NBA Finals last year, then plays in the Olympics, then goes right into preseason, then a full NBA season, then the playoffs. That is a ton of reps, especially for a player who prides themselves on playing on the balls of their feet. Look at Tatum's signature line of shoes, at least his first model. That first model was completely designed around aggressive forefoot play with a plate in the forefoot, everything around there. And that's great, but when you're always up on the balls of your feet, then randomly have a forced dorsiflexion like when he injured himself, the Achilles just isn't limber enough to handle it because it's spending all of that time contracted and not stretched. Plus, depending on what you believe, do you believe the official NBA stats? Do you believe what Tatum actually says? He hovers between 210 and 225 pounds. the average NBA weight's around, what, 217 to 220 or 225, I think. So that puts his BMI on the higher end at 24.77. There you go. And so that is just a tremendous amount of load coming down on those tendons. The second reason these injuries are happening more and more comes down to footwear. There is a reason that most basketball, and really other court shoes for that matter, historically have had higher heel to toe drops. Drops over 8 millimeters don't allow the Achilles to eccentrically load as violently or as much, especially shoes with more dense foams in the heel or Zoom Air, Air Max, that kind of thing. They also push you forward, almost priming you for forward propulsion. That's why a lot of basketball shoes have those higher drops. Now, of course, there are huge benefits to lower drop shoes. That's why we see them all the time. Take footwork like Kyrie's or Kobe's. You want to be able to rock back and forward a little easier, be closer to the ground, more flexibility, access to more degrees of freedom. I talk about this all the time. It's basically the entire ethos of the Nike Kobe line, which, yeah, I mean, you saw what happened to his Achilles too. It's not a huge coincidence. The other shoe component to look at is stiffness of the midsole. A stiffer midsole or stiffer shank across multiple foot zones, full-length carbon fiber insoles, do decrease the work needed to push off and do add a diving board effect to your push-offs and your jumps. But what they also do is transfer force proximally up the leg, so the Achilles now still has to generate force to push off, but over a shorter sequence of joint motion, because the shoe's sole is just bypassing all that motion, more importantly, force in your foot, and then shoots it up the leg, which means a higher Achilles force output per time unit. So even though, yeah, as a whole it's working less, when it actually is engaging, it's working harder over a shorter amount of time, which is why, you've heard me go on and on and on in my videos about how I prefer plastic shanks that get a little bit of motion to them versus a hyper stiff carbon fiber shank. Same thing when I talk about orthotics. And along this vein, those shoe components, I've heard a lot of people give very conflicting opinions on some other shoe components recently with potential effects on the Achilles, from it's the low tops doing it, to it's the high tops decreasing the mobility, to it's the toe spring of a shoe deconditioning the Achilles. In reality, the only one that has merit in that, at least in my opinion, is the over-aggressive toe spring in a shoe, which, yeah, it can decondition the Achilles just due to the higher angle of that forefoot, decreasing the need for Achilles propulsion. I still don't think it's the biggest factor. I think the heel to toe drop to me is much more consequential. But remember, it is multifactorial. It's not just heel drop, it's not just weight, it's not just this and that. There are multiple things that can cause it. So yeah, some deconditioning with a more aggressive toe spring or more aggressive angle of ascent, yes, could contribute. The low versus high top thing, I don't know. I just don't see it. But getting back to it, the third reason I think that these are happening so much, sometimes with everything a pro and amateur athlete has going on, with every guru telling you have to do this or that, every aspect of your game and life, sometimes something is just as simple and boring as keeping your Achilles limber with stretching can just get overlooked. Especially because stretching, or for 30 seconds here or there, does really next to nothing. It's like spitting in the ocean. You need to get extended time stretching to keep your Achilles limber and ready to fire efficiently. So oftentimes the stretching either just gets overlooked or underdone. And so now that I've done what any good fear-mongering YouTuber would do and scare you half to death, here is how you prevent this from happening to you. And I'll start this portion of the video off by saying nothing is 100% foolproof, unfortunately. Sometimes these things, they just happen. And sometimes it's just having your foot in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there are things you can do to decrease your risk significantly. Number one, and most important, is eccentric stretching. This is the most common thing I recommend to my patients by far. It is more powerful than any orthotic or any shoe. It is a super simple stretch. It begins with the balls of your feet on a step and the heel even with that step, followed by slow passive lowering of the heel. My modification to this stretch, I think it really takes it to the next level, is to lean to one side or the other, always keeping straight-legged for 30 seconds, then the other side of 30 seconds. That isolates each side. You should really feel this mostly behind your knee. It should be 30 seconds both feet, 30 seconds to one side, 30 seconds the other, 90 seconds total. Typically I have people do that 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or especially before and after playing. Second thing you can do is to get your footwear correct. If you want to use a lower drop shoe, that's fine, but make sure you understand what that means. And if you're going to use a lower drop shoe, then you better make sure you're practicing your negative steps, your hezzy steps. If you're a tennis player, your serve, maybe serving and volleying, under low consequence conditions and at lower speeds. And if you are gonna wear super stiff shoes, make sure to keep stretching and maintain your Achilles function. And a good way to know if you have like a good mix of support and motion in your shoe is to check what's called the longitudinal bending stiffness of the shoe. If you can smoothly bend the ball of the foot, the shoe at the ball of the foot, that's a good sign. When looking at torsional stability, the shoe, if there's zero movement, then it might be too stiff for like adequate, quote unquote, normal motion. So if no torsion in a shoe is equal to 10 out of 10, you wanna look for a shoe that's like right around a 5 to 7 out of 10, like enough rigidity to stop you from busting an ankle. That's a whole other video, but not 100% stiff, so that it like doesn't transmit all that force up the leg abnormally. Now also, there are ways to increase the drop of your shoe, and if you want to do this or have to do it just due to maybe a major discrepancy of leg lengths, hip issues, and just other things, that's all in my ebook along with a plethora of other shoe modifications and customizations. But as I say in my book, you can pick that up at footdrzack.com/customization, increasing drop artificially in a shoe will affect the containment and slippage. You are much better off just finding a shoe with a higher drop natively in it, because the heel counter and ankle collar we've made for that specific heel height, versus adding, padding in a shoe, adding height in it, potentially mismatching the fit. Orthotics also are a great option for mitigating rupture risk, because number one, they're great shock absorbers as well as decrease all that micro motion, which can lead to those chronic repetitive injuries. Orthotics to me are always a first line treatment for Achilles. I don't necessarily love taping though for prevention of ruptures, because it also decreases your flexibility and can make your body actually reliant on it. If you're coming back from an already ruptured Achilles, that is a totally different story. And to be honest, this is one of the few times I actually like to use KT tape, because KT tape it's a great training aid and can give you some fantastic biofeedback. It sends a ton of signals to your brain without restricting motion. The only problem is KT tape is pretty expensive, and putting it on all the time, that can get pretty costly as well as time consuming. So when it comes to Achilles ruptures, at least in my opinion, the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, really rings true. Just simple stretching, which does not cost a dime, and orthotics, even just lower priced over the counter, is like $35. I mean, the Power Step Bridge is like 35 bucks. Isn't sponsored, but you don't have to go to anything super expensive to get a lot of prevention. Like I said, other things kind of carry their own things there. The other thing is lower drop shoes are not going to inherently cause ruptures. There's tons of people playing in them, they don't rupture their Achilles. It's just that I think that the bigger thing you gotta look out for is recovery between really strenuous practices, games, matches, whatever, giving your body enough time. Like this is Tatum's game-worn shoe. I have it here, I've torn it open, I've done a video on it. I will link it after this video, and you should watch it because it does give a lot of clues, and it really shows you what was going on inside the shoe. And I think, yeah, maybe some things like, honestly, it's the drop of the shoe maybe was a little bit of a contributing factor there. I don't think the shoe in general was anything, but like I said, just the inherent drop of the shoe. But I think more in his case, if you want to know what I think is what caused it, it was how much he played. It was lack of rest, lack of recovery, him having a certain amount of footwork, and then him doing that perfect negative step. It was just all those things culminating. But I think that this thing started last year at the beginning of last season, and it was just not enough recovery into this season. Like I said, ton of super interesting Easter eggs in Tatum's game-worn shoe. And if you want to see the full teardown of these and all the little cool things underneath of these to make them custom to him, I'll leave that video linked right here, and make sure you subscribe down below. I'll see you in that video.